The first in a series of papers. We're told they'll address all the big issues. Her critics have branded it an appalling waste of time, energy and money. Well, let's hear from both sides of this debate. Pamela Nash is the Chief Executive of Scotland in Union. She joins us now alongside author, broadcaster and pro-independence campaigner Lesley Riddoch. Good morning to you both.
Good morning, Gary.
Lesley, we're hearing that this is the beginning of a campaign, but there are many hurdles to overcome before Nicola Sturgeon's desire to hold a referendum in 2023. Are you confident at this stage that it will actually happen?
Well, yes, and actually the order that this has been put forward by Nicola allows us to actually just for once discuss actually independence. You know, what has happened throughout the whole of the last campaign practically was that there was rightly a focus on the technical problems, the legislative problems that would come when you effect some kind of constitutional change. It never gave space to trying to discuss what that change would create and why 50% of Scots have actually got to the stage where they don't believe in the union anymore. So where we are now with a paper that's going to come out at 11 o'clock today is we're able to discuss the ideas about a different kind of future for Scotland, and glory be, because that didn't really happen so easily before.
And Pamela Nash, do you accept the democracy of this, that actually the SNP have won successive elections promising another referendum? So Nicola Sturgeon, as she said on our programme a little earlier, has the right to call this?
Look, I mean, people vote for parties for a variety of reasons, but what's clear in recent polls is that people do not want a referendum. It was asked in a poll just a few weeks ago, and only 29% of people in Scotland think that there should be a referendum next year, and that includes half of SNP voters. So it is not where the people of Scotland are at all. I think the government are completely out of touch with the public on this.
Well, in which case you must be confident of victory then in that case, if it is held.
Well, it doesn't come without cost, a referendum. It's not just about what would happen if Scotland left the UK. And I have to say, for over a decade now, I disagree with what Lesley's saying, that the arguments have been made loud and clear from the SNP, and they still can't get majority support from the Scottish population on independence. Like, every single poll that we've had this year has shown that people would vote yet again for us to remain in the United Kingdom. But it's not about if we had another referendum to ask again. The SNP will always come back and ask the question. They didn't respect the result last time. And that referendum doesn't come without cost in itself. It's divisive. It created a horrible atmosphere in Scotland last time, and it left our economy in limbo. People just do not want to go back to that time again.
Well, Lesley, just in terms of where we are at the moment, obviously there's a focus on a cost of living crisis. We've got issues with the EU, etc. Some people believe that that is a reason for not going ahead with this.
Well, but let's just pick on that then, this question of the economy. I mean, the Brexit that we didn't vote for in Scotland has left the UK GDP 5.2% smaller than it would have been if we'd stayed in. And that's a massive, massive impact. And anyone listening across Scotland knows the impact on businesses because of staffing shortages, as well as everything else. So that single change that happened in between then and now has basically split the deal, such as it was, that we were offered in 2014. So you can keep saying, when will we come back to this and look at it again? Will we wait, until we've lost the benefits of the renewables revolution that will go basically the same way as the oil money? Will we wait till we've lost another 5% of GDP? Will we wait till more refugees get sent to Rwanda, something I guess most Scots are bitterly opposed to? You know, will we wait for more law breaking? Is this the kind of government people feel that they can support and admire? And are we actually past that, admiring the leadership in politics? Because that's what it feels like with Westminster.
Is that your difficulty, Pamela Nash, from the pro-union side of all of this, that in essence, and I know that Boris Johnson is not in the party that you support, but ultimately in backing the union, you're backing Boris Johnson and all of the issues that Lesley has just addressed?
No, I absolutely do not back that at all. It would surprise you to hear. Look, people aren't daft.
But isn't that what staying in the union brings you?
Well, Boris Johnson, as every political leader, is temporary. The political leadership of the day is always temporary. Changing the constitution is a much more permanent reality for people if they chose that. And so people know that these emotive arguments that are being used at the moment on what the issues of the day are not reason to create a very permanent problem for Scotland. And just looking at what Lesley was talking about,
permanent, wasn't it?
Well,
Didn't Brexit
yes,
make a permanent change?
Absolutely, and many of us in Scotland, probably most, still wish that we were still in the EU. There's no denying that, but you've just mentioned there that the problems and the upheaval that Brexit has caused. Like, independence for Scotland would be like that on steroids. So I have to say that if you think
there are international rules governing the breakup of states, they've been applied in many previous situations. The only reason there would be a difficulty is because Westminster was behaving unreasonably. And why should we stay with a government because we fear their behaviour if we leave?
I don't accept that. I think it's just the union of the United Kingdom is lasted much longer, 5 times as long as we were in the EU, and we're much more integrated, and the problems it would cause would be inevitable, and we'd be creating a border on our own island between Scotland and England in that case. So yes, of course, many of us would want to rejoin the EU, but the costs of that and putting a border between us and England would not be worth it. It'd be a sledgehammer to cracking up.
Lesley Riddoch, how different would a campaign be this time round? Nicola Sturgeon is launching this paper today alongside Patrick Harvie. The Greens are now in government, but the Greens have got a very different view of what independence might look like compared to the SNP, for instance, when it comes to NATO membership. We also have Alex Salmond and his Alba party as well. Is there the danger that all these competing views, rather than one single view of what independence might mean, could muddy the waters this time round?
Well, actually, all those component parts were there the last time around, although the media may have given them less attention. But I imagine, actually, that the presence of a coalition agreement with the Greens and the SNP might mean that there's some straightforward statements of different approaches, particularly regarding NATO, which won't be wished away and aren't in that coalition agreement. But I think the thing is, for the wider Yes movement, that wasn't there in 2014, when we were at this point in 2012 with the Edinburgh Agreement, there was no widespread Yes movement. So that's the X ingredient in this, is really how the Yes movement responds now to getting itself together over the summer, because we had no more forward notice of this than anyone else.
And what about your side of this, Pamela Nash? For the Labour Party, for instance, to get into some sort of better together coalition with Boris Johnson and the Conservatives at this stage might be pretty tricky. So how do you see a campaign if we go down this road?
Yeah, well, look, both sides of this debate are a broad church, as is. So our side is, for instance, my organisation, we are non-party political, and we are united just by our belief that Scotland should remain in the United Kingdom. But at this stage, we're not talking about we don't think there will be another referendum. So there is no plans at the moment for Better Together 2, when we don't think there'll be NDRF 2.
But ultimately, I mean, is that a difficulty for those who are pro-union in terms of coalescing around a single candidate?
Look, others might raise those difficulties, but I would say that it's perfectly normal for politicians who disagree on other issues to come together to campaign for an issue they believe in. And what we find is that people usually respond warmly to that.
Let me just stay with you just for a second, just in terms of the arguments that need to be made. And even if you don't believe there's to be an independence referendum at the end of next year, the First Minister and others will be making that case over the coming months. Are you ready to respond with an argument about why staying in the Union is the best proposition for Scotland?
Look, it is clear that, to me, that Scotland's future is much stronger within the UK, and we absolutely are ready to make that positive argument.
Lesley Riddoch, the First Minister said yesterday that leaving the UK will not guarantee a better future for Scotland. Is that a difficult argument?
You can't have guarantees, and maybe this is the thing about it. I mean, the Scots have been quite a risk-averse bunch of people in many respects, and I think a lot of that comes from a dependency culture that arises from being at the very long tail end of a branch economy in the UK. So I think we need to get with that there are not cast-iron guarantees, and you see that by being part of what was meant to be one of the most solid economies and governance systems in the world, the mother of parliaments. Prorogued illegally, law breaking regularly, parties held through COVID. Everyone knows the long list. So, we've got to the stage now, I think, where we have to decide whether our own resources and our own outlook, which have been expressed for almost a century in not voting for Conservative governments at Westminster, is worth standing up in its own state and government. And half of us are already convinced. We'd like the chance to convince everyone else.
Thank you both very much for joining us this morning. Lesley Riddoch and Pamela Nash.